All right, welcome to the Benzo Rehab dungeon, religious deconstruction. We're not going to talk about religion, probably.
We
This
haven't
is,
really talked about religion in like some time.
yeah. Chats with Jacob is what we'll call this. Friend of the dungeon, Jacob, here joining us today. I'm your host, Michael Deebs. This is the worst intro anyone's ever given. This is the 11th talk that I've had with Jacob or someone like Jacob. Because I think, yeah, we had one with Dank the Lows that you weren't present for. So it is the 3rd of October 2021. I am here to tell you that democracy is a lie, and that's our plan for today. Is democracy is a lie.
I think our style of broadcasting, it's like the Mott and Bailey logical fallacy, except we just stay at the Mott. Like we just hold to that extreme
Yeah.
position, and it's just kind of like, yeah, this is an arbitrary axiomatic statement.
Right.
No, I will not explain. You know,
Exactly.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was talking to someone earlier today, and I told them I can't wait until like an act of stochastic terrorism is carried out in my name, and I believe in it.
yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I think I don't know if I guess for me, like as far as democracy is fake as a proposition, it's more like it the concept itself. I mean, there's plenty of uh, sophisticated theoretical arguments to be made that it about it as an inherent, just abstractly as a concept. But I mean, I guess you know given the fact that you and I are both living in the US of A, I mean, to me, well, one, we live in a republic, not a democracy, but two,
Yeah,
and
every
so
time I bring that up, somebody rolls their eyes at me. I'm
yeah,
like, oh,
but
okay.
also insofar as the like received wisdom is that we live in a democratic society, like
Right.
it's like, well, to me, the problem is, democracy as it, assuming for the sake of argument that it has played out to some extent here, has just evolved into an aristocracy of the wealthy, of the expert. Like we live in an autocratic, technocratic society.
Right.
Uh, to be in Congress, yeah, it helps to be a constitutional lawyer, business person, to sit on the Supreme Court. It helps to have gone to literally like one of, 5 law schools in the country. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
there's not really, in terms of like an actual flattening effect that democracy is supposed to have. I think the issue is that it the concept doesn't, what it ignores is that there is actually sort of a requisite strong state mechanism in order
Yes.
to maintain democracy, to democratize, because what it winds up happening is there's sort of an economic capture or wealthy capture of um, the institutions of power and government and commerce, etc. So you wind up having separate legal systems, separate economic systems,
Right.
separate kind of I mean, it's the difference between finance capitalism and people living in a finance capital sort of whatever lifestyle, like that's their earning capacity, and then you have people who are wage laborers. well, and even like now I'm just free associating, but I mean, even so, I've been seeing not recently, but I started paying attention to it recently and giving it some credence recently. This argument that the term PMC, like professional managerial class, is actually sort of a misnomer and actually sort of does a disservice to leftist politics, because what it does is it sort of confuses or belies the fact that the professional managerial class, like the people that they're actually the referent of that class, are still themselves actually workers, in terms of like how they actually earn,
Sure.
um, which is like true. It's not wrong, but also like it, I think part of the problem there though is it sort of reduces taxonomy to just economic power, when the difference between PMC versus like the proletariat or lumpen proles is that PMCs are the ones dictating and creating culture. Like they are the culture makers. Their consumption patterns are the ones that algorithms are keyed to.
Yeah. You brought up a couple of things in talking already. One of them is the state apparatus, I guess, which democracy is where you choose what the state apparatus sort of more or less enforces, and already when you have um, that state apparatus, I think you've already kind of like killed what would be actual democracy to an extent. Where
Yeah.
so I just earlier today when I was like in a coma from my hangover and just kind of like watching videos on YouTube and disassociating. I was watching a video on uh, Chief Sitting Bull, and
Mhm.
you know the the story there, and this is like very basics stuff for the whole like story of what happened with him and Custer and the Lakota tribe. But the Lakota have this territory in Montana, and it's established, and the U.S. government recognizes it as Lakota territory. It's fine. And then somebody discovers gold in the area, and yeah, and so you get all the gold
You know how
rushers.
this one goes.
Yeah, so you get a bunch of gold rushers entering the. Sorry, what was that?
I was singing the song from Beauty and the Beast.
Oh,
A tale as old as time.
yeah. So the U.S. government at this point is like, all right, we'll buy your territory for $6 million, and Lakota are like, fuck you, we don't recognize your money anyways. Like, your money is trash to us, and we don't want you to live here anyways. So they reject it, and for the colonizer, democracy exists. For the Lakota tribe, democracy doesn't exist, even though it's the same territory, the same region, sort of. And you get all these gold rushers going there, and the government sends the army to arrest gold rushers, but really what they're doing is they're protecting these gold rushers from the native tribes there. And then what ends up happening is the government gets frustrated with the Lakota tribe not wanting to sell, and so they stop restricting these gold rushers. And again, for the gold rusher, democracy exists because they've chosen, yes, I want to harvest this gold or whatever, and the Lakota don't have uh that same
Access.
access to the democracy of the area. And so that's why even when you go back to the ancient Greek uh democracy, it's only land owning males.
Yeah.
So democracy has never actually existed. Democracy.
Well, I mean, it's the same as for the Roman Republic. It's the cursus honorum, which is there's a literal sequence of offices that you have to hold when you're a
Right.
member of the senatorial class, in order to progress upwards.
Yeah.
Well, and even like in the Greek military too, there's the whole um, you know, there was the hoplite rebellion and the sort of transition there, but previously it was a matter of the Greek military were men who were wealthy enough to provide their own um, you know uh,
Equipment. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean it's the same thing in terms of like feudal knighthood. You have lords who are again landed gentry who are able to supply because they're extracting all of this wealth from people they're granted dominion over. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, 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 that's fine. And that's all good points that I was eventually feeling my.
Sorry.
No, that's good. Yeah, no, no, no. Democracy has never actually existed, and so one of the most annoying things that I've seen out of like Afghanistan, um, is this conversation about like, oh, we tried to give them democracy and it failed, and it's like, well, you can't give democracy to people because democracy, first off, doesn't exist. It's like uh ideological goal at best, and democracy oftentimes leads to, if everybody votes that, well, I mean, we're already seeing the effect of democracy, right? Everybody votes for Joe Biden, and it's not that things are better now. It's that we just voted for Joe Biden.
Well, and I mean, but also like in terms of U.S. foreign policy and us as this supposed democratizing force, I mean, especially in Afghanistan, the issue is that democracy is this sort of excuse to prosecute unjust wars, conduct unjust wars, because, well, and I mean, especially because, you know, for the last, what, it's 2021 now, since, arguably the mid 90s, US foreign policy has been dictated by, these neocon ideologues who want, a unipolar world in which the United States is the power. We are
Yeah.
the global empire. And I mean, that's like, and, in terms of, I mean, Afghanistan is an interesting example, but to me, like a more interesting example in that corner of the world is the Arab Spring, because like in the midst of the Arab Spring, the Western media consumers are caught up in this spirit of oh, the Arab world is democratizing itself, and it's like, I mean, mind you, and I'm not like saying like, oh, I'm a genius or anything, but like, I was, I don't know, at the tail end of high school, early college, around that time, and I'm sitting there like, look, if you fucking think these guys are going to transition to democracy, like, I've got an oil field to sell you,
Right.
it, and it's ludicrous to think that in a region of the world which is characterized not not unjustly or unduly by anti-American, anti-Western sentiment, that they would, uh, you know, through armed struggle, inaugurate non-democratic governments. To put it
Right.
light, I mean, I to put it kind of strongly, but honestly, I don't not sympathize with that progression. Like, I get it. I, obviously would prefer that they not have fundamentalist theocracies where people are lashed or beheaded or stoned or what have you. But also, like, I'm enough of a materialist to understand that, duh, you know?
Right. Well, it's also, I think a mischaracterization of the Middle Eastern world to, portray them as like barbaric in some way because they have,
Yeah, of course.
and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but that this is something that happens often where people say, "Oh yeah, it's terrible how the Taliban like chops off the hands of thieves or whatever," and it's like, Okay, so what we do in America is anybody who gets caught stealing goes to jail and they're never rehabilitated, and they spend the rest of their lives in and out of the jail system,
Right.
and it's horrible. So, like,
We just have debtors' prisons and legalized slavery. That's
yeah.
totally humane and civilized.
Right, yeah.
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 Um, yeah, no, I mean it's definitely a question of it's not even a question of different forms of barbarism. It's just a question of um because I mean to pose it as barbarism already sort of, poisons the well.
Sure.
Like I don't it's I think the problem the degree to which it's a legitimate characterization has to do with the um the way in which our society uh and the way there's a sort of literal economy of violence and also like a cultural kind of representational economy of violence, like in something like the Black Lives Matter movement and the increased visibility of extrajudicial killings of black men would be an example of this. Or and I mean again the prison industrial complex, the criminal punishment system, these are ways in which we make punishment invisible, whereas these other, if we're talking about something like stonings or beheadings or lashings or whatever, these are intentionally public types of violence, but they also serve a different function than what we're doing. The end is not the same.
Yeah.
It's not just, they both have punishment as a common end, but there are different sort of cultural sub ends or sub purposes, whatever you want to, however you want to put it.
Right,
Um,
yeah. I mean, a difference of viscerality, I guess.
yeah. I mean, I guess if I was being like really like,
Oh.
if I was being pragmatic, oh yeah, you already know. I
Oh
love.
man, we made it 17 minutes before we started
Yeah.
advocating for violence.
Oh yeah. The fact that you caught it like is disturbing. But
Well, we
no,
talk often, and I know what your tells are now. I think.
um, what I was going to say was that if we were being really pragmatic, what we do is we take Trump at his word that he could shoot people in the middle of Fifth Avenue and
Without a
would
doubt.
get off scot free. And what we do is we have like, I'm trying to satisfy the Trumpers and the pussy hat Russiagator types.
Yeah, which is what we're trying to do here on this
That's
broadcast.
yeah. This is an ecumenical podcast.
Yeah.
We hate everyone. We're ecumenical in our hate. So we make Trump the executioner. Like back in the day, there was the king's executioner. It was the person who, and with him, I mean, he's all about fucking ratings. He'd love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He can think of fun, different ways to execute people. Like, I don't know, I, I'm not a sick fuck.
Sure.
I'm a sick fuck, so I'm not going to think of ways. But yeah, and we give Trump the position of grand poobah of public executions. That's yeah.
Okay.
That's yeah. That's pragmatic
Yeah. Well, we got to vote that in. Problem.
because it's a democracy. We live in a
Yeah.
democracy.
Well,
Right.
this actually brings up another thing, the concept of the deep state, which is obviously often misused, um,
Right.
because the deep state does exist, and it's just bureaucratic
It,
entities that
yeah.
don't have any
Unelected
kind of,
political appointees.
yeah. So like, I never asked for Dr. Fauci to be on my fucking TV screen all the goddamn time, like. But yet here he is. He's in charge of public health to some degree, and
He's also the world's sexiest man alive, according
I
to
want to fucking
Guardian.
kill myself.
Yeah.
Man, I shouldn't have said that out loud. So
Now,
yesterday,
now,
this is a
now when the CIA suicides you, there's to be like, yeah, it's
yeah.
fucking.
Well, look, October 3rd,
Yeah.
he claimed he wanted to kill himself. Yeah. By the way, this is a quick aside. This won't be posted on Facebook because Facebook has removed my ability to post for 24 hours because I made a joke in the description of a live stream that we were dying in the woods.
Jeez.
Because we were playing a game called The Forest where you try to survive against cannibals in the woods. So Facebook, what's also funny is Facebook regularly recommends my friends like substance abuse counseling and shit like that because they follow the Benzo Rehab dungeon.
Yeah.
Great.
This is
We're
drug abuse.
we're big fans of not rehabilitating yourself here, by the way. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, this kind of functions as like an exposure therapy, aversion therapy
yeah.
type of rehabilitation where it's like you listen to us two jamokes and you're like, fuck, put down the booze.
Yeah, I should stop drinking. Jesus. Before I become like these guys.
Yeah.
Shit, where was I? Oh yeah, so the deep state. Which by the way, I'm wearing my anti-government.
Nice.
Yeah. That's what I tell people. They're like, "Oh, cool shirt." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's about the government." It's the all-seeing eye for the people who are just listening. But I didn't ask to see Dr. Fauci on my TV screen all the time. General Milley, who like transitions back and forth between like being goth or not goth, boss queen, bad bitch because he called China like whenever Trump was like doing his weird bullshit at the the January 6th stuff. And it's like, the libs go back and forth between yes, boss queen Millie and then like, somehow everyone forgot that he like committed war crimes against protesters when Trump was president. Like just go ahead and, throw that away. Anyways, I didn't ask for, him to be in charge of the fucking military or anything like that. And these are people who are making pretty substantial decisions. I mean, whether or not you agree with what he did, he called a counterpart of his in China to tell them like, hey, I think Trump is gonna try to do some wacky shit and he might try to declare war or something. If that happens, just know that we're cool. And like probably a better move than not, but if any of that were like even true, I think there's so much paranoia that happened with Trump that it just got to like ludicrous like responses.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but I didn't ask for that guy to be in charge of the military in that way, and I didn't ask him to call China, and I didn't, and I don't think. Go ahead.
One point to make apropos of the deep state, Trump, and the intelligence apparatus is that well, and so I also do want to say, because I think a lot of people now do hear the term deep state and automatically associate it with the right wing, with Trumpers, etc.
Barack Obama's still running the government, sort of stuff.
But the term itself is innocuous and value neutral. It was invented by political, like university political theorists. There's what's his name, Peter Dale Scott, as far as I know, is sort of the originator of the term.
Well, it was used to, I think, originally describe how Turkish politics were going, something like that, right?
Turkish?
Yeah, I think it was Turkish because the Turks started like instituting all these. You're breaking up a little bit. Sorry.
Am I? Hear me now?
Yeah, I think we're good. It was used to like describe the way that Turkish politics were working, and that they would elect a leader, and then the leader would like choose all these cabinet members, and it wasn't like necessarily what they wanted to have in those places.
Sure. Yeah. Well, but what's interesting there, though, I mean, there's almost a reversal here and the point I want to make about Trump and the CIA, and as well in the in the context of the deep state is the fact that, part of the reason that Trump is interesting to me is that, um, Obama was incredibly buddy buddy with the CIA,
Uh-huh.
did what
Yeah.
did what they wanted. Bush, same deal, also worth mentioning. W, the son of HW, who was the head of the CIA, was you know, prior to becoming an elected official, was a life career long company man. So the point vis-a-vis Trump is that, part of the reason he was so problematic to the intelligence community was because the CIA specifically was so used to having someone who was manageable,
Yeah.
who would do something. And I mean,
And they were also used to, if they had a president that wasn't manageable, they could
they kill him.
yeah, they could stage an assassination and pin it on a former Marine, which, by the way, if that ever happens to
It's
me,
not you.
it's not me. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
kill the
no,
president.
but it's like truly a legitimate point. I mean, they killed Kennedy, Nixon. They maybe a hot take, but they framed Nixon. For,
Oh, sure.
they discredited Nixon.
There was never in like Nixon didn't do anything that any president prior or any president since then has done,
Right. Well,
or
so
hasn't done.
yeah. So I mean, but like it is genuinely sort of crazy to think that you have this a general calling his counterpart in a country with whom we have frosty relations to say, wasn't us, buddy,
Yeah.
like, I mean, but I just like, I know you have this whole fixation on process governance,
It's the
and
worst.
but the point though is like I genuinely have a hard time imagining that were Trump one day after he gets off the pot and finishes his tweet storm, calling up the you know, whoever, the Joint Chiefs, and
Right.
saying, yeah, we're gonna do a war on China. They're not gonna fucking do that.
No.
The idea that Trump was ever gonna do or could have done, he would have done, sure, but could have done something so egregiously harmful on a in terms of like military action is just absurd. It's just not. And I'm not making a comment there on the limited power of the presidency.
No.
Comment on the
The unlimited power of going
enormity,
against the deep state, really.
yeah, the enormity exactly of the countervailing apparatus of power. And that's in spite of Dick Cheney's efforts to create the what is it called, the unilateral executive or whatever, to
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
go ahead.
that's what's interesting about like recent picks with Department of Justice. You have Dick Cheney kind of did a lot to facilitate that unilateral executive, and then you have Trump picking fucking Barr, William Barr, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, William Barr, and William Barr's like entire life project is creating also like a system of unilateral privilege, um, and you don't see that going away with. So you have Cheney who's like spearheading this effort, and then you have Obama who utilizes it as well,
right.
and then you have Trump who like takes it into turbocharge mode. You don't see that being rescinded with Biden.
No.
Like there's this whole thing about like we're having trouble getting the infrastructure deal passed, and it's like, well, you have no trouble like unilaterally making all kinds of fucking decisions except for whether or not we're going to like build our roads again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's like when Pelosi, before they went on reset, the Congress went on recess. She was like, "I the eviction moratorium, I leave it in the hands of the CDC. They're the ones
Yeah.
with the power." It's like,
And it was already like established that the Supreme Court was not going to rely on the CDC at that point.
yeah,
They wanted
yeah,
something to happen congressionally in order to like, and of course it's all just like theater and bullshit because why would you even be like, oh yeah, the only way that we can possibly make this decision is if Congress passes a law. And it's like, well, no, you
yeah,
make decisions all the time or don't make decisions all the time that severely impact people's lives. So like obviously it's all bullshit.
yeah. When
We live in a society,
we
what
live in
I'm
a
trying to say.
uh, a point to make too, with in terms of the unilateral executive too, then in terms of democracy, well, and just so there's this concept that comes from Carl Schmitt, who was a German, a Nazi jurist, and then this concept has been picked up by the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben. It's called the state of exception, which basically what it means is that in a society governed by sovereign power, um, that the sovereign is always the sovereign is both what makes the rule and is also the only exception to the rule.
Mhm.
Uh, but that it, as a matter of normal governance, normal process, it operates within the bounds of that sort of the sort of agreed upon legalities, etc. But then there's the state of exception is the suspension of that. So something like the Patriot Act, sort of arrogating to one, like, or another non-modern example would be, prior to Caesar, the role of the dictator in the Roman Republic, as an emergency position created to deal with an imminent threat. So, point being that I think since, not to overstate the importance of 9/11, because without I think things would be bad without 9/11, but I think it did certainly kind of crank the dial on things. But
Like it gave, and this is why I have criticism. Like I get I want to do terrorism, honestly. Like,
shit,
I get the feeling inside me like, man, it'd be better if I could just like blow something up over this, but it
I do
gives.
not endorse this position.
Of course you don't, coward. uh but I think and if we're being honest, everybody feels that way. Even
So
even
that's
even the shittiest lib feels that way,
of
where
course.
like you have all these people that are like um talking about like the vaccine mandates and shit like that, and they're like they're completely comfortable with like, yeah, if somebody doesn't want to get the vaccine, strap them down and stick them with the fucking needle.
Sure, absolutely. Uh-huh.
So everybody feels this way, where you want control over people that you disagree with,
Yeah,
and
so
that's what terrorism is
sure.
forcing control over people that you don't agree with. And I get that inkling, but I also, and here's where I redeem myself in what I've just said. I think that there's a failure in terroristic acts to actually legitimize the state response to terrorism. You
Mhm.
know, so if 9/11 never happened, we would probably still have some version of the Patriot Act, but I think it wouldn't have quite the amount of support that it had.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. 100%. Yeah.
So
Uh,
all that to say, terrorism bad, but I do understand it.
but I don't disagree with that. I think that's the reasonable opinion on terrorism, frankly. I mean,
Yeah, where I did this whole like thing where I went into, yeah, I agree with it, but I don't.
yeah,
That's a reasonable the
that's
take on
no,
it.
I'm not making a joke. I mean, because like if you think about it, the right wing sort of, here talking about the main U.S. mainstream politics, not the wing nuts. It's, oh, they hate us for our freedoms. They're
Yeah.
just savages. Blah blah.
What fucking freedoms first off?
Well, and then on the quote unquote left, it's like, I don't even know what the attitude is, because they almost do a like pseudo materialist analysis of like, well, yeah, we bombed their countries. I think what it is that they think the explanation is justification, whereas
Yeah.
I don't think explanation is justification. I still think people have agency, and can discern right and wrong, and I don't think liberals are so paternalistic, and patronizing. And did I say paternalistic?
Yes, you
uh,
did.
Dublin, duh, just, yeah,
Yeah.
on the point. Yeah, that they infantilize these people that they think they need to speak on behalf of.
Well, I remember when I was, more lib-brained, I think my walk towards leftist terrorism has been a long one where,
This is
uh,
not a terrorist
yeah,
podcast.
not a terrorist podcast. But no, my walk towards, like, and I wouldn't even say that I'm like fully leftist or anything like that. I think the left right
Yeah,
dichotomy is false to begin with. But like working towards more of like a true libertarianism, not the Libertarian Party of America sort of shit where it's
yeah,
like,
not right wing libertarianism.
yeah, more left wing libertarianism.
Proudhon, Kropotkin.
I remember there were points where I would talk about, the challenges that face black people, but I was speaking about them as, people who had no like um autonomy, I guess, like,
Right,
hey, they're, they grow up in poverty, and so when you're in poverty, like, you have no choice but to become X sort of stuff. And I was speaking of
sure.
them as others, and, it took me a while to realize that no, they're not others in that way, and it's all kind of just, I'm a class reductionist. I'll say it proudly.
Yeah, I would go that direction as well.
Yeah. And so, like all the, you know, and this is where, liberalism has such a failure, is that, um you're allowed to criticize a white criminal for doing something bad because, have quote unquote white privilege. But if you ever criticize like a black criminal, it's like, oh, that's racist or whatever. Um and to be fair, a lot of these things shouldn't even be crimes in the first place. Like stealing fucking food when your kids are starving should not be a crime. I think it's more a crime that we have people whose kids are starving, people
Yeah,
who are willing to steal for their children. I think it's more honorable to be the kind of person that would steal for your children than it is to sell somebody whose children are still stealing, or whose children are starving. Like sell them food. Like they obviously don't have money, so you're an asshole for trying to sell them something. But yeah, no, and fuck, I forgot how we got to the topic. I've been drinking.
uh, we're talking about lib brain, and
Oh yeah,
yeah.
lib brains. Yeah,
So you used to be lib brain, now you're wet brained.
yeah. Now everything's all smoothed out. Everything's good and fine. Uh,
Yeah, we're talking about lib brain and speaking on behalf of my
yeah, yeah.
cause.
Speaking on behalf of, communities, especially like black communities, which is what liberals love to fucking do sometimes. Um, where you're like,
No, I like, my the way I usually put it or conceive of it is really like specifically talking about black men. Like the only time that liberals actually care about black men
Is
is
when they're
when
being shot to death or
there's,
strangled.
there's cell phone footage of one being shot extrajudicially by the cops, or two, if there's a primary coming up.
Yeah,
The only two instances in which the life of a black man has any currency to liberals.
absolutely.
Um,
And
like,
it's all founded on this idea of representation, as if every
right,
black male has the same politics or belief set,
yeah,
which is also its own like
yeah,
insane proposition.
and again, patronizing, paternalistic, infantilizing. Um,
Well, speaking as a brown person that looks kind of Mexican,
mhm,
um, you know, I've heard it my entire life, about the Latino community that like, oh yeah, first off, if you ever hear anyone use the term Latin X or Latinx or however you fucking say that out loud,
mhm,
shoot them on sight. Um, not a real person anymore. Because and the reason I say that is because you're trying to force this. Like nobody in the Latina community has voted for Latinx as a fucking thing, right?
right,
And so you're telling all these people that no, the proper way to do this is to ungender your entire language and go with this weird, and it's not like Latin is already ungendered, right? It doesn't have the AO sort of gender
right,
marcation there. And so you're not only just like disrespecting the language of these people, but also like forcing this weird thing on them that they
yeah,
don't even recognize per their own rules of like how language works,
right.
where X means nothing to them. um X is usually used to like start words from like old god sort of like religious things
Right.
in their
Well, and
language.
it's also worth mentioning too that most of the people that do this come out of liberal arts backgrounds,
Yeah,
theater backgrounds, and it's worth mentioning that Gayatri Spivak, a scholar in her own right, but made her bones as Derrida's translator in English. You know, she wrote this incredibly famous, influential piece called "Can the Subaltern Speak?" in which she takes French theorists to task for invoking these um, orientalized, fetishized, third world raced figures in order to speak on their behalf. Basically, going after first worlders who are third worldists,
yeah.
if you know what I mean.
No, yeah, I get what you mean.
So and so the question, can subaltern speak? It's like, you know, it's a question of, you have these white educated subjects sort of ventriloquizing raced people for their own purposes. And I mean that's in the part of the point of it, or not her point, my point, I guess, would be to say, you know, what it amounts to is this moral, what I call a moral money laundering, where, white liberals don't want to see themselves as part of the problem.
Of course.
um,
Yeah.
they think that by um, supplicating and groveling and uh, sort of self-flagellating, it's a very like it's a very Christian.
No, and it's weird as fuck because nobody, I mean, no real person is like asking anybody to like whip themselves in the town square, right? And
A real person. I mean, there are people who
of
are,
course, yeah. We have some weirdos that are like out there
but it's all
saying
the
like,
people who are terminally online.
right, yeah, and it's like No, I think what people more want is just like a better life in general. Like, and you can't achieve that by going out into the town square and whipping yourself and like I don't know, doing weird performative like bizarre pieces of
Yeah, go out in the town square and whip yourself because it makes you horny, not because
yeah.
it's gonna make your life better, you know?
Do it for fucking, not for
Do it,
politics
do
or
it to count.
yeah. Shit. Um. Well, shoot. Where do we go in this conversation about? I feel like we've probably lost the thread a little bit, but
Yeah, but
uh,
that's sort of that's the
yeah,
that's the brand. I think we've been going for like what, like 45 minutes?
45 minutes. Yeah, actually, almost exactly.
I can last a long time, maybe.
If we're gonna continue any longer, I need to refresh my drink.
Yeah.
Uh, maybe we take a fiver and then come back and say more. All right, we are returning from a little boys' room visit. We didn't visit little boys in a room or anything like that. We went to the restroom. I'm still here with Jacob, who probably doesn't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
Only one of us is Catholic, by the way.
Calls for violence are fine. I don't think I've joked about violence against kids, but never
Yeah,
sexual violence.
right. Which
I
is
just,
where the line is drawn.
just incited people to kill their fucking kids.
Yeah.
You know, perfectly reasonable.
So we're still talking about how democracy isn't real, right? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah,
Do we even know what we're doing anymore?
and the CIA, and
Yeah,
it's the deep
it's all
state.
bullshit. Let's talk a bit. Let's talk about the CIA a little bit. And again, if I'm found dead, I didn't do it. It's the CIA did. The CIA is terrifying to me.
Let's say more about that, Michael. That's a stunning
Yeah.
observation.
Well, I mean, so when we're talking about how democracy isn't real, and I listened to a couple of podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to is
He listens to.
yeah, look, man, useful idiots.
Oh, I think I've heard of that. I don't know.
It's a pretty good podcast. I think they do some interesting conversation pieces there. But one of the things that they talk about is how the news media has become like the stenographers of like whatever the State Department says, and what the State Department says kind of more or less comes from whatever the intelligence agencies tell the State
Right.
Department is real. There's not a whole lot of investigation that happens in news media beyond official state line is nowadays.
Right.
And that may partially be because there's a long history of reporters who say the wrong things winding up dead. Um, you have the author of the Panama
Oh, right. Yeah.
what was it, the Panama documents? Is that what it was called? Panama
There's,
files.
she was Maltese, right?
Yeah,
Her,
yeah,
Greg.
yeah,
Right.
and she just happens to die by the it happens to a lot of us where our car explodes
Yeah.
when we turn it
No, I
on.
mean, it happens.
Yeah.
What probably happened was there was a recall notice that she ignored.
Yeah.
It was her fault.
Like, well,
That's
I mean, isn't it kind of reflex when you get that call like your car's warranty is about to expire, you just hang up on them.
for
She
sure.
did that too many times. There was an actual like recall notice that she ignored, and therefore her car blew up because she wasn't paying attention.
Probably fair.
So yeah, when we uh, a large part of our democracy is informed by people who are also just like consuming State Department talking points.
Yeah.
um and it's funny because we talked about how dumb liberals are, and during the Trump administration, you had this like liberal outcry because Trump is against the CIA, and it's like probably the only good points he ever made were like how like shitty and corrupt the CIA and FBI are,
Right.
and then you've got all these like weird fucking libs like
Yeah.
thirst posting about fucking James Comey and shit, Um, was Comey one of the underwears that was sold? Because I know we have Cuomo sexuals
Oh.
and Fauci underwear and
Oh yeah. Who's the other guy? Richard, the lawyer, the special investigator.
oh
What is his name? Fucking he looked like a hound dog. He looked like a Huckleberry Hound.
yeah. There was James Comey and there was yeah, I know who you're talking about. Like why is it not coming?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but also like in terms of the intelligent shit in Trump, there's this whole ludicrous story that he's a Russian asset. And I mean, I think we talked about this last time with a little bit of, I think we talked a little bit about like Felix Sater. Um, Mueller.
Mueller, yeah, Richard googling it off screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, just all this like, oh, we love the FBI now, and it's like, and
Yeah.
and
No,
and
I
and I
mean,
even saw this, and I still see this to some degree in like circles of people that consider themselves leftist, where like the January 6th insurrection stuff, right? Like you had a bunch of uh lefty hackers like revealing information about the insurrection, that sort of stuff, to the FBI. Like, why are you doing? First off, the FBI controls an apparatus that if they can't figure out who was fucking there
right.
and who was doing what, like, why are we even fucking paying taxes at this point? Because they've got everything they could possibly need to do all of that.
Well, I mean, that speaks to the whole public humiliation purpose of dox. I think anyone who doxes anyone is uh, lame at.
Ooh. you're willing to go on record with such a hot take?
Yeah, no, I think it's literally snitching.
Mm.
Doxing is no fucking different from snitching. Like that's
Yeah.
it. You're a little fucking rat.
Well,
And
and also, just the basic fact of like you're gonna work with the FBI to some capacity, or any kind of like uh state body, and the FBI has such a history of being so cool with leftist movements, right? Like
hey,
the CIA and the FBI have always been for and when we talk about how democracy isn't real, um our intelligence agencies have historically stood against any time democracy leans towards communism
right,
or socialism.
yeah,
um our we live in what we but she's falsely, I guess, call a democracy, and our intelligence agencies crush anytime democracy leans a certain direction that it doesn't like.
yeah. I mean, the real 9/11 was the ouster of Salvador Allende.
Yeah,
Was
that's
the
that's the
original.
real 9/11.
The other one's fake, just like democracy.
Let's talk about big buildings.
Oh boy. Did you see there's a video of what's that guy's name? Lynn Wood talking about how it was CGI.
I believe it. I
You
believe.
know,
I believe. I believe the World Trade Center was never actually built,
it's kind of a
and
Bears kind of thing, or
yeah,
the Mandela effect.
yeah, the Mandela effect. No, the World Trade Center was never built because only a fucking moron would build a building that tall. I work in building maintenance, and let me just tell you, like the pumping systems that you need to get facilities all the way up to the top floor of something that's like 100 stories tall is
Yeah.
pretty fucking intense. And anyone that would build a building that tall is fucking stupid. So Maybe it's good that they brought it.
Oh boy. What? Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah, where do we go from here, huh?
I'm just glad you're the one saying egregious because it's usually me. Usually, I think I'm the one that loose cannon. Yeah. Where do we go? Do we call it
I think we
dead?
call it at this point.
Yeah.
Before I say something
Otherwise,
worse.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to get fucking. I don't want to get a knock on the door.
Yeah.
Any of our esteemed
Intelligence
agents.
agency. Yeah. Mm. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Um, yeah.
We always tell people to, I know you usually tell people to take their meds.
Yeah.
So
Take your medicine.
I would say take your meds and don't forget to vote.
Take your meds and research Building 7.
Shoot, that's a good point. Yeah.
All right. Bye. Hi. Michael Deebs here, with no gun pointed at my head. Please know that all content created for the Benzo Rehab Dungeon is and always will be freely available. However, if you would like to support this creation of content, we here at Camp Benzo would appreciate it, as the production itself is not free of cost. Anything donated will go to covering the various subscription fees maintained for content production or improving and expanding the content produced. If you are able to, please head on over to patreon.com/benzorehabdungeon. We also have shirts for sale on Teespring, all priced as low as we can get them without turning much or any profit. They are mostly so that you can show your loved ones that a necessary intervention may be on the horizon. Links to the merchandise storefront and our various social media profiles can be found on our link tree, which is the word linktr.ee/benzorehabdungeon. As always, we love you. Please take your medicine.